This is Liquid Legato, Phase 4. We don't develop technique in order to have good technique. We develop technique in order to play music and to play it well. So it's all about music. The point is music, the inspiration is music. That's what we really want to achieve, right? So the best way to go about honing your technique is to find music that uses that technique and learn that music. But the problem is that if the music is very difficult, very advanced, and you're not really within striking distance of being able to pull that off, then you can struggle and really never feel like you're getting closer to it. There are some tricks to be able to move toward being able to play that music. And I'm going to be showing you some of those tricks as we move forward here. Anyway, the music that I've selected to show you today is from Joe Satriani, because Satriani is pretty much the undisputed master of legato technique, both in terms of technique and its musical application. So we're going to start with a piece by Joe Satriani. I'm going to show you the theme of the song Not of This Earth. It's the title track of his debut album. It's actually the first example in this book, Guitar Signature Licks, Best of Joe Satriani. It's a book audio package by Hal Leonard and written by Dale Turner. And I actually recorded the leads on most of the guitar in this particular book. So anyway, I'm going to show you this one. Inevitably, when you're looking at very difficult music, advanced high-level stuff, it is not as easy as just slowing it down and playing it and speeding it up. If you go by that route, you're really never going to quite get there. So there are some tricks and some things to get you on the right path, and I'm going to touch on a few of them here, and I'll just show you the beginning of this. But there's too much material to cover in one short video. The first thing that you'll notice as you look at this kind of stuff is these rhythmic figures that are completely incomprehensible. I mean, look at this. Beat 2 starts with a 30-second note rest, then a click, that's a 30-second note, then another rest, and then 5 more 30-second notes running up to the peak note on beat 3. How could anyone ever really play that? Well, you can't. You have to take all that stuff with a little grain of salt and really look for the essence of what's important here, what's really happening. This is really important when you're trying to learn something that's note for note. Because I've done a number of these. These transcriptions come from the Guitar Recorded Versions books, and Guitar Recorded Versions was all about being as accurate as possible. If you're going to notate everything down to the nth degree super accurately, you're going to start notating the mistakes that were made by players. You're going to start notating slippage of time and so forth. So did he actually intend to click that first note after beat 2? I doubt it. What's really happening here is that he's playing back on the beat. He's playing something where he's feeling the pulse and he's accenting on 2, but because he's back on the beat, well, technically, if you slow this thing down, you're going to notice that it is slightly behind the beat, and therefore accuracy would say go ahead and notate it as a 64th note rest. But this is a level of detail that really we have to learn how to ignore. I mean, yeah, you want to know all the details. You want it note for note. You want to play it accurately. But there's a point at which accuracy becomes insanity, okay? And you got to know where that point is. There is no way that I could take these transcriptions and actually turn them into real music if I didn't know where that point was. So what I'm going to show you here isn't just, here's the notes of the song. I mean, that's pretty easy to find out. What's a lot more difficult is how do you approach these complex phrases, these weird rhythmic patterns that are going all over the place? How do you actually play this stuff in a way that works, that enables you to get it under your fingers and actually sound right? And the answer basically is we kind of need to divide this into two different phases. On the one hand, we have the mechanics, which are the sequences in the left hand. We want to ignore the rhythm intricacies, at least at the first stage. Look for the patterns and then practice so that those patterns, which are, I call them mechanics, certain sequences of notes, certain patterns of notes, you can get that under your fingers and you can get your fingers under control so they can do the thing. And each of these patterns then can be done sort of like as a muscle memory. It's like, oh, that pattern, bang, you do it. And then here's another one, and here's another one, then you can string them together. So you need to know how to interpret these lines, where to split them up, and then how to practice each piece of it, practice it repeatedly, practice it with some variations so that you get control over all of these different elements. When you get control over that, then you can come back and look at rhythmic aspects. You can't do complex rhythm on top of multiple patterns of notes if you can't do the patterns first. So you've got to get that first, then we'll take a look at the rhythms. Here we are in the key of E, and he's using what came to be known as a pitch axis technique. All that means is, we're pedaling along on the root note E, but the different kinds of modes over E each produce a different flavor, and he's switching back and forth between them. So he's playing a Lydian mode, then he'll play Mixolydian, he'll play minor, and back and forth. And the first lick is E Lydian. Hold, and then come down. And how is that E Lydian? Well, take E. And then this is the second. This is the major third. This is sharp 4. That's what's characteristic of Lydian. And then 5, major 6, major 7. So what we're really doing here with this lick is he's running up the Lydian mode and then he's hanging on that major 7th, and it sounds kind of sour. Kind of like a question mark hanging out there. Then in the next measure, it goes to E minor. So here, I'm going to start on E, and I'm going to play up the minor scale. And then switch positions and start here on B, the 5th. Now this part is timed. It comes in on an upbeat, so it's a triplet on the upbeat. And then the next downbeat is a triplet. And then there, what we need to do is you need to drill this as a mechanic where you pick once, hammer, hammer, pull, pull, and then hammer to the 5th string without picking. And then when you string them together, and then we descend from that note, slide, and that's, again, natural minor scale down to the B. Put it together, you have that. What's important is to know which notes you kind of want to lean into as emphasis notes, or I call them lock points. Those are the notes I want to pay special attention to. So I think of a set of 3, a set of 3, and then this thing, and then that. And when you piece it together like that, it sort of becomes somewhat comprehensible. Next measure is back to the Lydian mode. And then we have this nice long run that kind of completes this first phrase. Slow it down, it's this. Now, usually as you're learning something, it's kind of a natural approach to want to subdivide the pattern based on the rhythm. So, for example, if you have a run of 16th notes, you might subdivide it into groups of 4 and see each group of 4 as a pattern that you string together. But here, we're really not doing that. We don't have time. What he's doing is a technique I call note cramming. So he's running through the pattern and he's coming out at the end of the phrase kind of by feel. Well, the only way to get to note cramming is to get the left-hand patterns down so well that you can just see the pattern and run through it, and it just happens as a unit. And then if you're good enough with your sense of pulse, you can tap automatically, no matter what you're playing, you can kind of feel where that beat is. Then what'll end up happening is you'll start being able to feel bigger time. You'll feel the phrases, and then you'll feel as you're playing to the end of the phrase, part of you is aware of kind of where you are rhythmically and that you're closing the end of the phrase. And I might not really be paying attention exactly to where the pulse is, but I can feel the phrase end come out at the end of the phrase on my feet. So when I play like this, what I'm really doing is there are certain lock points, again, certain notes that I kind of feel as the contour runs fast, and it'll hit a note, like a peak note, turn around, run up again, hit another one. And those are the notes that I will feel the rhythm of, as opposed to feeling the rhythm of every note. The first one is this note. That's more or less on a downbeat. Again, in order to do that, you kind of need to be able to turn the whole thing into a flow. So you have to separate it up into stages. And the first stage might just be this, where you're actually playing one note at a time. But after you get that down and you get the hang of that, it turns into a flow. Well, now it sort of becomes one thing. At the top, the contour turns back down that string and then goes up to the second string. And then there. Now this, by the way, is all E mixolydian. So if you looked at the E chord here, it would look like E major until we got to D. And having a D makes it D mixolydian, the flat 7. So it's a mixolydian run, but we start on the second of the scale. A couple of ideas to go about practicing that. Obviously, it depends on the stage that you're at, but you could break it apart into this piece, add the next string, and then maybe come back down. Another thing you can do is practice the turnaround spots. So maybe this. You have to be able to do that mechanic. Now put them together. From this point, how about this one? And that would put the lock point there. So it's not like I'm looking at this in sextuplets or 16th notes or anything else. I'm looking at the pattern. The number of notes in it is kind of irrelevant, but I'm kind of going for certain spots where I'm kind of feeling that lock point as if I'm going to insert pulse. From that point, another set, running up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then a lock point here. So those add up to an E7. The next phrase repeats that theme, but now we're an octave higher, so the energy's up a little bit. So this becomes this. And then he does a minor lick. That'll get you started on this tune, which is a really excellent legato exercise. I mean, there are so many legato passages in here that, you work on this a while and your hand will get moving really fast. Then to drop those passages in with the right timing and the right feel, that's a whole nother level. So I'm going to get into all that, the rhythmic application, to take it all the way in my much longer video lesson on this song, all the techniques it uses and how to practice it on my Patreon page. For example, on this part, there are syncopations, offbeat rhythms on the important notes, and then decorations around those notes. So it's like rhythms on top of rhythms. It's a great technique. When you understand what's going on, not only will you develop your technique, but you'll have some extra tools on how to create more interesting lines. So I'm going to go over all that on Patreon. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. I'll see you in the next video.